All right, so let's get into some quantifiers. So let's remind ourselves we have the two quantifiers, the upside down A and the backwards E. Upside down A is universal quantifier, means every or all roughly. Backwards E is the existential quantifier, roughly means some or exists. So our grammar rule says if you have a variable in a formula, then you can stick a quantifier on the front of them. So you take the variable, then you put the formula, and then you put the variable, and then before that you put the quantifier. So the pair of quantifier plus variable go in the same place that a negation can go in terms of building sentences or formulas. So let's look at some examples. So universal quantifier x, fx. Is that grammatical? Well, let's see. F and then x. So big F, predicate letter, x variable, predicate letter followed by variable. That's fine. That's a formula. So on the front of that, we can put a quantifier and then a variable. So this is grammatical. How about some y, not ly? Well, big L is a predicate letter. Y is a variable. So we have a predicate letter followed by a variable. So that's a formula. We can put a negation on the front of that and build another formula. So we can take our quantifier and put a variable and attach it to the not ly. That's grammatical. How about some I, ji, or ki? Well, big K is a variable, is a predicate letter, and I is a variable, so ki passes. It's a formula. Big J is also a predicate letter followed by a variable, so that's a formula. Have two formulas, you can put an or in between them, you have a new formula. So ji or ki is a formula, so we can put a quantifier and then a variable on the front. So if we do existential and then variable I, we put that on the front of ji or ki, that's a new one. How about for all xp? So this looks funny because there are no variables in there, but it's actually okay. Sentence letter is a formula, and the quantifier rule says if you have a formula, you can put a universal quantifier and then any variable you want. So this does follow the rule. And in fact, it's just equivalent to the sentence letter P. That universal quantifier on the front isn't doing anything, but in terms of the grammar of our language, it is a formula. It is grammatical. It's odd, you wouldn't say it, but it is grammatical. For all x, some y, fx, and gy. Well, gy is okay, predicate letter variable. Fx is okay, predicate letter variable. Put a conjunction together and you have a new formula. So you can put a y in the front and an existential quantifier before that. You have a new formula. Well, you can put a universal quantifier and an x on the front of that. And that also passes. Now, that is, we're not going to see sentences where we have multiple quantifiers, one inside of another like that, but it is perfectly grammatical. If we had more time in this class, we would, but we don't have that time, so we're not going to see those. How about this? So let's see, ht, predicate letter variable, yes. So some ht is a quantifier, a variable, and then a formula. That's good. Fx is fine. For all x, fx is fine. So we have two formulas for all x, fx, and for some tht. So we can put an arrow in the middle, and we have a conditional statement. How about for all not x, fx? So fx is fine. That's a formula. But then xfx is not a formula, and so you can't put a negation on the front of that. When you have fx, you could put a negation on it, or you could put for all and then x, and then you could put a negation on the front of that. But the negation has to go on either side of for all and then x. It can't go in the middle, so that doesn't count. That's no good. And finally, for all x, x. That doesn't work either because for all x always goes on to formulas. It doesn't attach just to a variable. And so that is also not grammatical. Good. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these problems, how they work in the parsing module. Hello. So we're going to look at some examples in the parsing module where we do parsing with quantifiers. So here we have some x, fx. So fx, that's a predicate letter followed by a variable, and then we have a quantifier and a variable in front. So we have a formula with a quantifier and a variable in front. So this looks good. So how do we break it down? Well, the main operator here is the existential quantifier. So we're going to click on that, and it breaks it into the x and the fx. Now we click on the f. Well, if we check it, it's going to say it's incomplete. So we need to finish the tree. So we click on the f, breaks it down. So now our tree is complete. We need to say, is it official, informal, or not well formed? Well, there are no parentheses, so it might be informal, except that there's nothing in there that would add parentheses. Remember, parentheses come from just arrow and double arrow and or. We don't have any of those, so we shouldn't have any parentheses, so it's official. So that is good. We like official. for this problem. How about 3002? So we have exponential x negation parenthesis fx parenthesis. So the fx, that's a formula, right? That's good. And then we have a negation on the front of that. But it's a negation not on the front of fx, it's a negation on the front of those parentheses. So we have to ask, where did the parentheses come from? And they didn't come from anywhere. Remember where parentheses come from. There are no symbols in this sentence that could introduce parentheses. That means those parentheses don't belong there, and this is not well formed, and there's no tree to be done. It would be well formed if there were no parentheses, if we just had some x, not fx, but we don't, and so it's not well formed. End of story. How about this? Some x, f, not x. Well, where do negations go? Negations go only on the front of a formula. Here the negation is in front of just that variable x. That's not where negations go. This is also not well formed. How about this one? Negation, some x, not fx. So fx is fine. Putting a negation on the front of it is also fine. That makes a new formula. So we can put some x on the front of not fx. That's fine. And we can put a negation on the front of that. So if we break it down, we'll remove that negation. This thing was built by adding the whole thing by adding a negation to that formula. Well, that formula was built by taking not fx, putting an x on the front of it, and then putting a negation on the front of that. This is down to variables, it's done. This, we remove the negation, we get fx, and finally we split up the f and the x. So we have a tree, so it's official or informal. There are no parentheses, and there shouldn't be any, so it's official. Let's go look at 8. Some x, not dx. What do we think? This is not well formed because of that d. D is a name. It's not a predicate letter. If this were to be official, or if this would be grammatically correct, we would need a predicate letter where that little d is, but there isn't one, so it's not well formed. Okay, good. Let's look at a few more. Let's look at 9. So this is just a big thing. Might be a little bit hard to tell, so we could just try clicking in the tree. If we were going to click in, or in symbols to see if it breaks down, if we're going to click, where would we want to click? Well, there's that parenthesis, and then there's a formula, and there's an arrow. So if this is going to be a formula, that's going to be because this thing here is also a formula that I've highlighted. So if there's a main operator, it's that one. Okay, so we'll break this side down. If we look in here, if we look at the right side, we see parenthesis and then a formula and then an and. And that means that if there's a main operator in here, it's got to be that and. So we'll break that down. Now we have a sentence that actually starts with a universal, not with a quantifier. Right? This thing on the top and this thing on the top did not start with quantifiers. The quantifiers was inside the parenthesis. The quantifier works just like the negation, right? It's added to a formula. So a quantifier is the main operator only when it's the very first thing and there are no parentheses and it's in official notation. So in this case, it's that universal was attached to this conditional. So let's break the conditional down into the F's and the G's. And that's official notation. No parentheses were removed. So that's good. Let's see. We want to do, let's take a look at 10. All right, so, well, it might be official, might be informal, might be not well formed. If there's a main operator, it's that arrow. That doesn't look good, so what's going on here? The problem is that there are 3 pairs of parentheses, but there's only one operator that adds parentheses, the conditional, and so there should only be 1 pair of parentheses. This pair of parentheses is bad, and this pair of parentheses is bad. If we got rid of those, then we would have a sentence, but without them, it's not well formed. Okay, so I think that you get the idea. You click on the quantifier when it's the main operator, and that's only when it's at the front and it's official notation. Otherwise, you have to find some other operator. So good luck with your parsing.